Jaya Radha Mara Radha Mara Radha Mara Jaya Radha Mara. Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada. Jai Vishnupada Paramahamsa Pariva Acharya Ashtodatara Srimad His Divine Loving Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Grandaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Tagore Premanande. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory. Thank you, Prabhu. All glory to Sri Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Okay. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter number 21. Instructions by Maharaj Prithu, text number 12. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Madhurayat Nastapreshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavadina Ishtaki. Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming. Happy Krishna Conscious Friday. Every day is a Friday in Krishna consciousness, but every day is also a Monday.
Yes.
So, okay. Yeah, go here. We're on a tighter than normal schedule, so cool. Faster than usual. Sarvatra Shikalita Desha. Try again. Sarvatra Kalita Desha. Sapta Dvipaika Dandadrik. Anyatra Brahmana Kulad. Anyatra Chuta Gotra. Sarvatra Skalita Desha. Sapta Dvipaika Dandadrik. Anyatra Brahmana Kulad. Anyatra Chuta Gotrataha. Sarvatra Kshalita Desha. Sapta Dvaipika Dandadrik. Anyatra Brahmana Kulad. Anyatra Chuta Gotrataha. Hello.
Sarvatra Skalita Desha.
Sarvatra Kshalita Desha.
Sapta Dvipaika Dandadrik.
Sapta Dvipika Dandadrik.
Anyatra Brahmana Kulad.
Anyatra Brahmana Kulad.
Anyatra Chuta Gotrataha.
Anyatra Chuta Gotrataha.
Sarvatra Saklita Desha.
Sarvatra Kshalita Desha. Sapta Dvipaika Dandadrik. Anyatra Brahmana Kulad. Anyatra Chuta Gotrataha. Word for word. Time restraints. Sarvatra, everywhere. Ashkalita, irrevocable. Adesha, order. Saptadvipa, 7 islands. Eka, 1. Dandadrik, the ruler who holds the scepter. Anyatra, except. Brahmana Kulat, Brahmins and saintly persons. Anyatra, except. Achyuta Gotrataha, descendants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vaishnavas. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj Prithu was an unrivaled king and possessed the scepter for ruling all the 7 islands on the surface of the globe. No one could disobey his irrevocable orders, but the saintly persons, the Brahmanas, and the descendants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Vaishnavas. Please repeat. Maharaj Prithu was an unrivaled king and possessed the scepter for ruling all the 7 islands on the surface of the globe. No one can disobey his irrevocable orders, but the saintly persons, the Brahmanas, and the descendants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Vaishnavas. Purport. Saptadvip refers to the 7 great islands or continents on the surface of the globe. 1. Asia. 2. Europe. 3. Africa. 4. North America. 5. South America. 6. Australia. And 7. Oceania. In the modern age, people are under the impression that during the Vedic period or the prehistoric ages, America and many other parts of the world had not been discovered. But that is not a fact. Prithu Maharaj ruled over the world many thousands of years before the so-called prehistoric age. And it is clearly mentioned here that in those days, not only were all the different parts of the world known, but they were ruled by one king, Maharaj Prithu. The country where Prithu Maharaj resided must have been in India, because it is stated in the 11th verse of this chapter that he lived in the tract of land between the Ganges and the Jamuna. This tract of land, which is called Brahmavatra, consists of what is known in the modern age as portions of Punjab and northern India. It is clear that the kings of India once ruled all over the world and that their culture was Vedic. The word Akshalita indicates that orders by the king could not be disobeyed by anyone in the entire world. Such orders, however, were never issued to control saintly persons or descendants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. The Supreme Lord is known as Achyuta, and Lord Krishna is addressed as such by Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. Senayoru bayor madhye ratam sapaya mechuta. Achyuta refers to one who does not fall because he is never influenced by the modes of material nature. When a living entity falls down to the material world from his original position, he becomes Chuta, which means that he forgets his relationship with Achyuta. Actually, every living entity is part and parcel, or son of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When influenced by the modes of material nature, a living entity forgets this relationship and thinks in terms of different species of life. But when he again comes to his original consciousness, he does not observe such bodily designations. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita 15.8 by the words, Pandita Samadarshinaha. Material designations create differentiation in terms of caste, color, creed, nationality, etc. Different gotras or family designations are distinctions in terms of the material body. But when one comes to Krishna consciousness, he immediately becomes one of the Achyuta Gotra, or descendants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus becomes transcendental to all considerations of caste, creed, color, and nationality. Prithu Maharaj had no control over the Brahman Kula, which refers to the learned scholars in the Vedic age, nor over the Vaishnavas, who are above the considerations of Vedic knowledge. It is therefore said, I'm just going to go ahead and read the translation. One who thinks the deity in the temple to be made of wood or stone, who thinks of the spiritual master in the disciplic succession as an ordinary man, who thinks that the Vaishnava in the Achyuta Gotra to belong to a certain caste, creed, or one who thinks of Charnamrita or Ganges water as ordinary water is taken to be a resident of hell. From the facts presented in this verse, it appears that people in general should be controlled by a king until they come to the platform of Vaishnavas and Brahmanas, who are not under the control of anyone. Brahmana refers to one who knows Brahman, or the impersonal feature of the absolute truth, and a Vaishnava is one who serves the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Can I get a tissue? Om Agyanatamarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurue Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master is opening my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I have for my respectful obeisances unto him. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharain Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashtachade Shatarain Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Ivanandaya Dasya Vanachani Prabhupada Valabhaya Singha Sridhamanurni Gyana Dvanta Gramana Pashta Chapatitatmanu Gyana Guru Teti Namaha. So this is a really nice verse, and it kind of segues us into we can talk about kind of a nice system of transcendence that the Supreme Lord has laid down. So Krishna created a transcendental system for the living entities in the material world to escape. And that transcendental system is essentially Varnashram Dharma. And Parameshwar Prabhu we were speaking the other day about the yoga ladder and the karma yoga, and we were mentioning how he was mentioning in class how, some people think that just doing my duty is bhakti when it's not. So I figured we can actually, since we talked about it, we can talk a little about that because it kind of segues in here a little bit. So Srila Prabhupada's making the point that the Vaishnavas and the Brahmins are beyond the jurisdiction of the king or of the state law. And that can be, we have to take that in the right way and understand that in the proper perspective. So first thing we should understand is, in an actual Daivi Varnashram society, who is the real king? Krishna is the king. So in a real society, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the king. And it's understood that the government or the authorities are essentially working under the hierarchy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's an extension of the kingdom of God. And that's sometimes called a theocracy, although we're not really, people aren't really fond of that word, but a seriously divine theocracy is something that is positive, or a divine monarchy, you can say, or theocracy. So Krishna created this transcendental system by which the Supreme Lord is the predominating entity over all living entities and all governments. And so the first stage of connection between the Lord and the people is the Lord is acting through Shastra, through the saintly people who are elevated, namely the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas, especially the sannyasis, and the bona fide teachers. So they're the actual supreme guiders, or in a sense, the directors of society. They're directing society in a moral and spiritual direction, and they're actually, advising the Kshatriyas and the kings and the saintly rulers. So the purpose of the Lord is in establishing Varnashram is that the Brahmanas are ideally absorbed in Brahman or Par Brahman, meaning Krishna. So you can analyze and understand that actually we say Brahman, we say like, oh, we take Brahman initiation, It actually, in actual Varnashram society, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas and Brahmanas all took sacred thread initiation and all received the Gayatri mantra. So from the strict perspective of Varnashram, the Brahmana as a Varna means that person is engaged in performing sacrifice, engaging others in sacrifice, worshiping the deity, teaching others how to worship the deity, reading the scriptures and teaching the scriptures. Those are the occupational duties of a Brahmin. So that's how a Brahmin actually performs and lives, by performing those activities. Those are the Varna duties of a Brahmin. And so the Brahmin is situated in his duty of doing that for society, teaching and essentially advising the Kshatriyas. And then the Kshatriyas are the divine rulers who are taking guidance from the Brahmins and therefore guiding the society in such a way that the world is being facilitated, or the policies are facilitated in such a way that people are understanding how to return back to the spiritual world. They're using their human life for its divine purpose. The Sutta Goswami says, Dharma slanushtita pumsam vishvakshena katashriyaha not pariyad yatiratim shrama evahe kevalam. He says that all the duties in the material world, all the human dharmas, are useless labor if they don't provoke attraction for the message of Vishvakshena, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we have so many varnashram duties in this divine system, but they're useless if they don't provoke that attraction to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's the main point, is that the leader of the society is doing things in such a way that the lower castes are working for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, when Roy Ramananda and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met in their conversation, their famous conversation, which is one of the most important dialogues in our entire Gaudiya Vaishnav tradition, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, what is the highest thing? And the very first thing that Ramananda Roy said is, just do your duty in Varnashram Dharma. So that was a very important point. But of course, Lord Chaitanya said, there's something higher than that. And then they began to ultimately raise the Dharma to, service in the mood of the gopis. But the Vaishnavas are beyond the king because they're on this transcendental platform. So we have to understand how everything works. And the best way to understand that is to understand the yoga ladder in its real proper way. You have to understand it properly. And if you understand it properly, it makes your performance of bhakti yoga easier, and it allows you to really preach in a more dynamic way. So the first rung of the yoga ladder is varnashram. That actually there's no yoga besides bhakti. There's no yoga without varnashram. So when people say, I have to do my duty, that's my karma yoga. That's not actual karma yoga, because karma yoga means you're performing your Daivi Varnashram duty. Because in a society that's ruled by a saintly person, everybody's serving the king, who's a representative of God. And so that service can actually be done as bhakti, because it's being prescribed by the Lord. Rick kind of looks like he has a four-handed form right now. It's prescribed by the Lord. So, yeah. Where's that? Yeah, so in order to perform actual Varnashram Dharma, in order to perform actual karma yoga, one has to live in a society that is doing divine duties, the actual duties of a Sudra, a Kshatriya, a Brahmin, and a Vaishya. So that excludes yoga. Yoga does not exist on the platform of sinful activity. There is no yoga on the platform of sin. It doesn't exist. It has to be understood. So you cannot perform sinful activity and call it yoga. So that means essentially all of the jobs in the world we have today in modern society are not able to be done in actual karma yoga, because they're in the mode of ignorance. You can't sell meat. You can't sell alcohol. You can't associate with intoxicants. You can't, fight these evil oil wars that are for nothing, that are, essentially to make money and serve rich people who want to become richer, to serve demons. You can't join the demon army to fight the other demon army. You can't do that and call it karma yoga. It doesn't exist. Those activities are all basically karmic. So in previous times when Daivi Varnashram actually existed, when you had saintly kings like Yudhisthira and Prithu, then yeah, one can be a Kshatriya and fight a religious war. Just like Arjuna, of course, the higher dharma, the paradharma was that he was fighting because Krishna wanted him to fight. But then Krishna, at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, speaks at this lower level. He says, happy are such Kshatriyas who fighting opportunities come unsought. Because you should perform your religious duty of fighting, he says. He actually says your religious duty of fighting. So the dharmic duty of fighting, that's actual dharma. So that duty can be done in karma yoga. And or karma kanda. Even karma kanda is still higher than just plain sinful life, but karma kanda doesn't exist without varnashram either. One has to be living on the pious platform to even perform karma kanda, because you can't perform karma kanda and be eating meat, doing all these sinful activities, unless you actually kill a goat, offer it to Kali, do the whole ritual. That's karma kanda. But still, it's on the pious level because it's following the scriptures, it's following the guru, it's following the sadhu. So therefore, you cannot perform any duties religiously in Kali Yuga. So karma yoga is essentially really very difficult to perform even in Kali Yuga. You know, Krishna is encouraging karma yoga. Prabhupada's really translating that karma yoga and putting it in a way that we can understand it as bhakti. So, yeah, it's not really possible. So if one can perform karma yoga, if one can, like talking in Vedic times, Krishna says, you know, there are so many people who have achieved perfection due to performing their prescribed duty. And Krishna cites that King Janak, the father of Sita, attained all perfection simply by performing prescribed duties. But his prescribed duties were divine. He was a divine king following divine instruction from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in that sense, one can perform karma yoga. One can do one's duty as an offering to God. And just by fulfilling one's duty without attachment, one rises from the platform of Sakam Karma Yoga to Nishkam Karma Yoga. So Sakam Karma Yoga means I'm performing activities in my duty with the expectation of some result. And Nishkam Karma Yoga means I'm performing my activities without the expectation of some result. In other words, I'm offering my activities under the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I'm just doing my duty. And so in that sense, one can become completely situated on the Brahman platform by performing one's duty. And so when we say Brahman platform, we literally mean they can understand they're not this body. So in the fourth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that all types of sacrifice culminate in transcendental knowledge. All sacrifices culminate in transcendental knowledge. So if one's duty is a yajna, if one's duty is a sacrifice, then yes, that culminates in transcendental knowledge. What is that transcendental knowledge Krishna is referring to? That's referring to the understanding or the vigyan that one is not this body. But that is not the end-all be-all of spirituality. The end-all be-all of spirituality is Krishna Prem. So if one performs one's duty properly and it's under divine rule, then one can attain transcendental knowledge. I mean, they can understand they're not this body. So that is actual karma yoga. And so when one understands they're not this body, they become transcendental to the varnashram system. And so there's this whole dynamic going on in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna is explaining that Arjuna wants to leave. He wants to leave the battlefield and become a mendicant. And Krishna is saying, no, you should do your religious duty of fighting, because he's saying you don't have the adhikar to take karma sannyas. You don't have the qualification. So the thing about it is Gyan Yoga, which is the other type of yoga Krishna speaks about in the Bhagavad Gita, aside from bhakti. Gyan Yoga is practically impossible for a person in the material world who's conditioned. Gyan Yoga is a very, very difficult path, extraordinarily difficult. Because, and that's why Krishna is saying, yeah, you can perform Gyan Yoga, but you don't have the qualification, because a Gyan Yogi begins at the stage of karma sannyas. So karma sannyas, when I say karma sannyas, it means he's stopped all fruitive activity. So a Gyan Yogi is someone who's stopped all fruitive activity and simply lives in the state of trying to understand what is matter, what is spirit. So he's meditating, he's reading the Gyan Shastras, he's speculating. That's what a Gyan Yogi does. And he may do that for Bahunam Janmanamate, many, many lifetimes before he actually realizes true transcendental knowledge of Krishna. But that's what Gyan Yoga is. So Gyan Yoga can begin when Karma Yoga stops. But if one wants, they can continue practicing Karma Yoga all the way to perfection. That's why Krishna recommends Karma Yoga over Gyan Yoga. But so therefore, Karma Yoga, because we don't have a divine system where the king is divine ruler working under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Brahmins, the Shastras, because we don't have a divine king, all of our duties that would be done in Karma Yoga essentially are not possible to perform in actual Karma Yoga. So Karma Yoga is not really a viable option for Kali Yuga. Gyan Yoga requires us to give up everything, go to the forest, and do Gyan Yoga. We can't do that because Arjuna was saying, Krishna explained, by your nature, you have to fight because you're conditioned to being a Kshatriya. You're still under the modes of material nature. Therefore, you have to fight. So Gyan Yoga, not a viable option in Kali Yuga. So therefore, because Karma Yoga is not viable, because there's no divine duty, there's no actual, all of the duties are essentially and innately sinful in Kali Yuga, this do your duty concept doesn't work. And the Gyan Yoga concept, because the adhikar is so high to perform, it doesn't work. I mean, there are very, very, very rare individuals that may have the adhikar to perform actual Jnana Yoga. And then there's Ashtanga Yoga, which Ashtanga Yoga recommends, Krishna says, in the beginning, work is said to be the means, and at the later stage, cessation of work is said to be the means. So the beginning of meditational or Dhyan Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga is work. So real Ashtanga Yoga at the beginning stage is essentially perform Karma Yoga, not possible in this age, while also practicing Yam, Niyam, which is not happening because no one actually follows any Shastra and there's no leadership that's following Shastra. Pranayam, Asan, they're doing those things. At the later stage, one begins to practice actual meditation and can come to the platform of transcendental knowledge. And that's the line where Krishna, Maitreya Muni is speaking about here, that the Brahmins and the Vaishnavas and the saintly persons are above that king, because that's when the line is drawn. Everybody here under this line of transcendental knowledge, and when I say transcendental knowledge, I mean knowledge that I'm not this body. Everybody under that line is essentially under the modes of the material nature, and therefore has to perform religious duties in order to escape that conditioning. But if one practices Karma Yoga, because Karma Yoga is purifying you, doing your duty, if it's a serious, real duty under a divine king, purifies you because it is ultimately good. It's ultimately serving Krishna because it's a divine order. So Varnashram is a gradual process of purification. And therefore one can become purified to a point where they realize I'm not this body. And at that stage, they either have the option to continue performing their prescribed duty, like King Janak, who continued to perform his prescribed duty even though he was liberated. Maharaj Ambarish continued to perform his prescribed duty even though he was liberated. They can either continue performing their prescribed duty in the liberated state, or they can leave their varna and take karma sannyas and practice, Jnana Yoga or meditational yoga, be in the liberated stage. Or one can, if one is already on that stage, he can practice Jnana Yoga and be situated there. And Ashtanga Yoga is the same. But you can, all these other yogas, including Gyan, Karma, and Ashtanga, they don't even come to the platform of Bhagavan realization, of realizing God, of Krishna. That can only be done Bhakti Mama Vijananti Yavanyash Tasmi Tatvata Tatamam Tatvato Gyatas Vishate Tadanantaram. That can only be done through bhakti. So the point I'm making is that the adhikar, or the qualification to perform Karma Yoga, isn't even present in this age because we're all innately sinful. So much sin in this, not that we're innately sinful by the soul, but all the duties, everything is just very sinful. And then Jnana Yoga, no one can really take sannyas in that sense. Even our sannyas, Vaishnava sannyasis are active. They're active in the world. Whereas these Gyan or karma sannyasis, they're essentially really just sit and contemplate Vedanta. So it's not really viable. Ashtanga Yoga is not viable. So why is Bhakti Yoga viable? Because only the process of chanting, the 9 processes of bhakti, hearing, chanting, remembering, offering our service to the lotus feet, all these, etc. All these 9 processes, they can purify one even if they're below the level of a chandala. They can purify one from the lowest level. If you're chanting the holy name, no matter where you're at, you can be purified. And so it's described that most of the time the karma sannyasis or the Gyan yogis, they fall back down into philanthropic activities because they didn't really even have the adhikar to maintain that state of just sannyas, of just renouncing all material activities and engaging in my mind and Brahman. So therefore they're forced to act in the world. Whereas even if a Vaishnava sannyasi is described, even if someone takes sannyas prematurely as a Vaishnava, if they continue hearing and chanting with seriousness, the purification is so rapid that they purify all that karma and they come to that level. Because the Vaishnava always has activity to perform in Krishna consciousness. So therefore, even if one is below varnashram and is in the full sinful condition, if they're exposed to the processes of bhakti, namely hearing, chanting, taking prasad, they can become very quickly elevated and give up sinful activity. And when it comes to duty or working in the world, that has to be done in a certain way too. Like we were explaining that all of the duties in varnashram are essentially divine because they're working under a divine king who's working under the direction of the Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. So there's gradual purification. But what about for us in this world trying to practice the only viable process, bhakti? That would mean that this is how it works. Is that you can't just say, I'm doing this for Krishna, I'm doing that for Krishna. That's speculation. That doesn't work. Bhakti has to come from bhakti. So the key factor is you have to come in contact with a seriously elevated bhakti yogi to guide you. So it's described by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary to the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that essentially bhakti yoga really is only the 9 processes. That's what bhakti yoga is. And then other things like varnashram are considered secondary. They can be considered bhakti in the fact that sometimes they support the practice of bhakti, just like someone may thrive in the grihastha ashram, some may thrive in the brahmacharya ashram. So those things are supporting the practice of bhakti, but they're not essentially bhakti themselves. They have nothing to do with that realm of bhakti. That realm of bhakti means just essentially being absorbed in the name, fame, qualities, pastimes of the personality of Godhead. So what about, I'm a grihastha, I have to work in the world. What about that? Well, the key is to have the guru or the Vaishnavas authorize your work. Like, the guru, essentially you surrender to the guru, and the guru's duty, the Vaishnav's duty is to help you in your progressive path back to Godhead. So if someone doesn't have the qualification to take sannyas, they need to get married, they need to do so many things, then okay. Then Prabhupada explains, that even a sannyasi supports that. So Srila Prabhupada married his disciples and so forth, because this is something that's going to support the practice of hearing and chanting. One can easily hear and chant with a more peaceful mind in this ashram or that ashram. And therefore, one has, until one is completely purified, one has some material duties to perform. Until one's a Paramahamsa, one has some material duties to perform. So one has to perform those material duties under the jurisdiction and the assignment of the guru. When the guru says, okay, you have a family, you should, work a job, support your family, give so much to the temple, go out on Sankirtan, do some deity worship. And Krishna says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu, mamanusmaram yudicha, manai prita mano budhir, mameva shashya shamshaiha. Just perform your prescribed duty of fighting while at the same time remembering me in the form of Krishna. With your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. So there's that key factor that allows our activities in the material world to be in the realm of bhakti, is that now I'm doing it under the serious guidance of my guru in a surrendered way. And the guru's never going to tell you, oh yeah, like work your slaughterhouse job, or your job at the bar, or whatever, your casino job, or whatever it may be. Of course, Krishna explains that all activities are covered by some, like just like fire's covered by smoke, all activities are covered by some fault. So there's some fault, but generally we're trying to engage or stay in the mode of goodness and perform activities in the mode of goodness under the instruction of the guru. And therefore, with that serious devotion in mind, with that idea that I'm really doing this all to facilitate my family's Krishna consciousness, all to facilitate my own Krishna consciousness, all to really facilitate getting to the stage of perfect hearing and chanting. Krishna says, Apichet Siddharacharo Bhajate Mamananyabak Sadareva Samantavyaha Samyak Vyavashito Saha. He says that even if one commits the most abominable activity, if one is properly situated in devotional service, he's to be considered saintly because Bhajate Mamananyabak, he has this serious and unflinching devotion to Krishna. So Prabhupada explains that sometimes, the devotee may generally as acting totally according to scripture, but sometimes it may seem that there's some contradiction. Like in the case of Arjuna, he was committing so many scriptural problems, from the lower dharmas. He was killing his family, he was killing his seniors, he was killing his guru. It was really, he was literally murdering one of the greatest 12 Mahajan Vaishnavas in the whole universe. So from all the perspectives, Arjuna was committing extremely sinful activities, but he was acting under the explicit instruction of Krishna. And for our case, we're acting under the explicit instruction of Krishna's representative, Shiksha and Diksha Guru. So therefore, the process of work becomes the process of dasyam, service. And therefore, all of our material duties can be transformed into bhakti. That's how it works. And so in the Bhagavad Gita, if you read the Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, he's really Vishwanath has this way of he like speaks in such a way that he like understands the mind of Krishna. Don't try that at home, people. He does it as he can do that because he's Vishwanath and he's Kamanjari from the spiritual world. So the thing is he writes this way that he like gives elaborations as to what is Krishna thinking in this verse. And so there's the verse, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever charity you give, whatever you offer, give away, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. That verse, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that verse. He's explaining karma yoga, that you do whatever you do for me, as long as it's not sinful. So it's not possible in Kali Yuga because everything's innately sinful. Like the farmer, the Vaishya in the Satya Yuga is not sinful. The Kshatriya in the Satya Yuga is not sinful. He's just doing his duty. It's actually a divine duty. But the Kshatriyas in this Yuga, you can't join the oil war and go kill innocent people and say that, oh, I'm just doing my duty, because there's no godly, saintly person anywhere in sight that's making this happen. So it doesn't work. So in that age, it was possible. Krishna says, whatever you do as an offering to me. And Vishwanath says that Krishna was like saying, he was explaining bhakti yoga, but then he said, if you can't do that, just perform karma yoga. The first verse is bhakti. He says, patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhakti priyachati. And just basically he's saying, offer me fruit, flower, water, leaf with love and devotion. He's telling Arjuna to love me. That's the most important aspect of bhakti yoga, of all yoga. But then he's saying, if you can't do that, just perform your prescribed duty and you'll be purified. Yat karosi, yadashnasi, yaj jahosi dadasi, yat tat karosi madarpanam. So do whatever you're doing, just for me. We can't do that. So therefore, we have to engage in the process of serious hearing and chanting under the instruction of a great authority of the Vaishnavas. Okay, the Bhagavatam says, Etanya vidyamananam ichitam makutobayam yoginam nirmanirtim haranam kirtanam. That the chanting of the holy name is the doubtless and fearless way to success for all, if it's done under the instruction or the guidance of the great authorities. Whether one is full of material desires, whether one is yogi, self-satisfied, or whether one is sense-controlled, it's the doubtless and fearless way to success. But there's that important part that it's done under authorities. Yeah, so bhakti is coming from bhakti. Okay, that's all. Is there any questions or comments? Amanga?
Yeah, I understand the basic points of how Varnashram really, to do it perfectly in the Vedic sense, is impossible in this age, because the way our society is set up, the only people that are supposed to earn paychecks in Varnashram are Sudras. They're given a certain amount of money, and they're not given over that amount because they're prone to engage in sinful activities. And so the way it's said, like a Brahmana can't earn a paycheck. A Kshatriya can only get money by taxes from the citizens. A Vaishya can only get money by his trade in agriculture or his business. So just the fact that people have to go to work, every day and get a paycheck on the Varnashram level, that puts you on the level of Sudra.
Always. And so in that sense, I was explaining, we take Brahmin initiation.
Yeah.
That's Pancharatrika initiation to perform deity worship, but that doesn't actually make us Brahmins in the sense of Vedic Brahmins. Like in Mayapur, when you see those, Gurukulis who are just fully engaged in, doing yagyas all day, those guys, and they support themselves that way, they're actual Brahmins, from in the Varna sense. But for someone who is in the Kali Yuga, Mayapur is the spiritual world, of course, it doesn't work. And so, it's a fantastic misunderstanding that people have. So the only real way to work in the world for someone seriously aspiring to go back home, back to Godhead, is to take guidance from the Guru. And in that way, whatever karma may be involved in your job is nullified if you dovetail it seriously to Krishna's service under the proper guidance. That's why, even Arjuna, from the Varnashram perspective, was committing immense sin. His duty, that was not, but the highest duty is, Yato Bhakti or Hoksajay. So, yeah.
The only point Prabhupada would give is that a soldier can go to war and kill all kinds of people, and then he comes home and gets a medal because he's acting under higher authority. But if you do that independently on the street, you go to jail.
Yeah, but in this day and age, a Kshatriya, for us, a soldier, they don't have a higher authority. Their higher authority is a demon. And so you can't just go out. Of course, you can still hear and chant and be purified, but still there's karma involved in that. If you, I'm going to join the army and do my duty, but you're actually fighting a sinful war under sinful people. So there's still karma. So the devotees have to make choices intelligently. That's no way around that. And if someone's caught up in that, like, oh, I'm already in the military, now I got to, now I've been enlightened. Okay, you still have to finish out your karma. But then you engage in the viable process of purification in this age is hearing and chanting. And that works no matter where you're at. That's why bhakti is the only viable process. Quickly, Lolita, because we're on time.
Well, I was just wondering, sometimes we have people that say, oh, they don't need this, they're practicing another kind of yoga. And you covered that a little bit. And then sometimes they'll get a little bit upset and say, well, it sounds like you're saying that this is the only way to, this is the only path. And so what do you say to someone like that?
Well, Parameshwar Prabhu was explaining nicely at the Bhagavad Gita class, like those paths, they do have some value and some merit. So you can kind of encourage in one sense. But I like to explain like this, like, you can get so many experiences from practicing, meditation and things like that. You can get higher consciousness experiences, but when you understand the goal of yoga is to know the personality of Godhead, then that's not possible by any other means besides bhakti in this age. So you can get like a lot of nice material benefits, even Brahman realization, if you're, in the proper circumstances, but you can't actually achieve, Krishna. Whereas in other ages, one could actually achieve Krishna or Bhagavan realization by performing, devotional meditation, just like Kapila Dev describes. But it's not, we can't do that in this age. That's kind of how I do it, but gently.
Don't say it. What you're doing is for nothing and it's all nonsense. You don't want to say that.
What? Parameshwar Prabhu.
You work in some karma job. I mean, 50% was the rule, I guess, somewhere, Rupa Goswami, I guess, gave 50% of his wealth to Krishna conscious activities. So by doing that, you're engaging it properly. Otherwise, the karma will just pile up on you and you'll be forced to take another birth.
Yeah. Absolutely. Go to Srimad Bhagavatam ki.